Before we jump in today's video, I just want to remind everybody that I'm not a financial advisor. So this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be taken as financial, investment, or trading advice. All investments involve risk, and you should do your own research or consult with a licensed financial professional before making any investment decisions. Just remember, past performance is not indicative of future results. All right. Hey, everybody. It's Paul here on my channel, Better Call Paul. And today we have a really special guest. Some of you may know him from Blossom. You can see he's wearing his shirt today and or from his YouTube channel. This is Car Young Tom. Car, welcome to the channel. Thanks for agreeing to speak with me today.
I'm more than happy to drop by. I've listened to your conversations, excellent conversations with Darren. And, you're someone that is an excellent contributor to the community.
Yeah, Darren's a great guy. I love talking to him. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, Car, is because, as you know, on Blossom, there's this big debate between growth and income. And I really like the way you handle it. Like, I love your approach to that. You're not the kind of person who says, well, income investors are stupid. They shouldn't do, what they're doing. You kind of just, you stick to your, concepts of why you invest the way you do. And you delicately talk about income investing without being offensive or rude. And I think that's the way to do it. Like, I have no problems with anybody asking me questions or maybe debating why I do what I do, as long as they can do it nicely. I don't think it's too much to ask, right?
Right.
So what I'm trying to figure out as an income investor, I'm 52 years old. I lost my full-time job in September. What I'm trying to figure out is, with my portfolio, is there a safe amount that I can withdraw? And I think you probably have to reevaluate this on an annual basis. Am I wrong about that?
No, you do. Which is why, there's critique that the 4% rule that you've heard is just like a starting point, like a concept that you can take learnings from, but not like to use it exactly.
Right. Can you briefly explain the 4% rule?
Okay. So the reason I dug into this is because ultimately I've read a lot of posts, and even in your conversation, and someone on Blossom, I don't know if you've read his post, Ed Sam, I butt heads with him a bit.
Yeah.
Because he comes at it like worried or critical of the 4% rule because of what it sort of implies when you think about it. And you mentioned it too. It's like, okay, if I need 40K, like what kind of portfolio I need? Wait, I need 2 million or something like that. So I was like, wait a minute. What is the 4% rule actually saying? Where does it come from? And does someone actually need like 2 million and 40K to what you and Ed Sam were saying, like, adjusted for inflation doesn't seem like a lot of money down the line, right? So a lot of these things make sense to me intuitively. So looking at the rule, I think more than 50 years ago, like there are different studies. There's the Trinity study and some guy named by the name of Bengen, who studied this and came up with the 4% rule after analyzing US total market returns, 70 years worth of data, but then sort of simulating it, I think, by grabbing different 30-year periods. So roughly how someone would retire. And Bengen found that somewhere around 4% would make sure that if you withdrew it, you start with 4% of your portfolio, and inflation adjusted, so every year you withdraw 4% plus a percentage of inflation, you would not run out of money regardless of the sequence of those returns. But the reason why it's overly conservative is because you might have pensions, you might have government programs, and this ensures that you don't run out of money, which means in a lot of scenarios, you end up with a lot of money, which might not be something you want to do. You might, as some people, I haven't read the book yet, but some people want to die with zero, right? So that 4% rule might be overly conservative because of these factors. And on top of that, it assumes the expected total return of the future and of the chosen strategy that you pick is similar to that data set. So roughly 10%, and the volatility is similar to that. So again, that's why in posts that you might read of me, I said, like, if you're someone that thinks you might get a lot higher returns at a lower volatility, you can adjust that 4% you withdraw even higher. But the reason no one should be using this is because this is like, you're not going to withdraw a set amount plus inflation until you die. It's like, I don't see that happening, that people are actually going to do this. So, but that, I hope that covers what that 4% rule comes from. It's really on a specific data set on specific total historical returns of the US market. And, so it's not that's why I say it's like, it's not a critique of a particular growth strategy. It's more like, you're just viewing a possible withdrawal strategy of using 30 of the last 70 years of US data. So it's very tied to that. And what you want is like to draw learnings from it. And one of the learnings that I said, like, that means like, obviously, because of sequence of returns, your withdrawal rate has to be a number lower than your expected annualized return. So if you expect like, 10%, it's got to be somewhat lower to account for the fact that you might get hammered in the first few years.
Gotcha. So now you just said something about sequence of returns. Is it risk? Or no, sequence of withdrawals, risk.
Sequence of returns risk is how they put it.
Okay. So can you explain that?
Yeah. So it's specifically if you, let's say you expect your strategy, as an example, right? Total example, 10% return for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
And let's say some years you have 30, some years you have minus 30, plus 10, minus 50, plus 50, but you expect that in a long sample, it average out to 10.
10.
And based on the order of that, so one person can have all the positive returns at the beginning and all the negatives at the beginning, but so like me and you, we can still average the same 10%, but our years might be different. And if I start with like positive returns and then at the tail end I nosedive versus you who might start below and then like you surge at the end, you're going to have, it's more risky for you because you mentioned in Darren podcast, that's accurate because you have you're withdrawing from a lower portfolio value, and then that lower portfolio value can like help you less because there's less amount invested for the future. And that's why there's that risk. That's why you have to adjust it lower versus, let's say you have a GIC, right? Your capital is not at risk at all. You get 4%. You know that you can, let's say it's a 4% GIC, you know every year you can just withdraw 4%, zero risk until infinity, right?
Right.
But because stocks or even any covered call ETF, any ETFs are tied to the stock market, there's that NAV risk or whatever. You have to be aware of that. And that's why you can't take out the amount of the total return. Yeah, it has to be a number lower just to account for that possibility.
Gotcha.
However, again, you adjust for that based on how stable and the returns of your strategy, which is, as I'm known to do, it's like highly subjective to every person. I don't impose anyone what I think their expected return or volatility of their strategy is, but those are the variables that they should be aware of to adjust that 4% shortcut if they want to work from there.
So basically, the worst case scenario is you retire just before either a market crash or a 1 or 2 year bear market, and your portfolio takes a really big hit from the start.
Right.
That's what you want to avoid. Well, you can't avoid it. If it happens, it happens. Now,
right. Well, you're not avoiding it. It just changes the percentage you want to take out.
So I don't know if you follow the dividend guy, Mike Haru. He's from Montreal as well.
I've seen a bit of his content.
Yeah. So what he talks about is using a cash wedge of laddered GICs so that if there happens to be a bear market, and I think he said on average the longest bear market ever was something like 3 years. So he's factoring in 3 years of a bear market where he has GICs, like you said, would not be affected by the market, that he could use that cash to supplement his portfolio. So what I'm trying to, and I tried to get in touch with him, but he never replied to me. What I'm trying to figure out is maybe that's something, because he's a dividend growth investor. Maybe it's something that income investors should have as well. Maybe should have some sort of cash set aside. So if, say, for example, in 2026, all of a sudden the market tanks and my monthly income drops by half, I don't have to actually touch it. I could just reinvest and use my cash instead.
Yeah, and that's why even just me starting to read, I've only scratched the surface because I think it's something that I have to think more about. Maybe 10 years from now, but I started because it's such an interesting topic and not analyzed enough, because most people, well, most people I see on Blossom are really young people, or people who just started to invest and like, oh, how do I get started?
Yeah.
So, but that's what makes this topic so interesting, because there's just so many different strategies to attack it.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about like the cash wedge, or even the classic, which is laddering up in terms of bonds, amount of bonds, right? That's the classic strategy, going from 100% stocks to eventually 80, 60, 40, I don't know. So that's a legitimate, popular approach. And it's an approach that I have to dig more into. But the other one is to adjust the. I'm gravitating towards more being the more modern way to approach it, is to adjust based on the returns. And they call it like a dynamic spending. So you're spending, you adapt to it towards whatever you expect the returns to be. And again, Paul, like I want to ask you, like this affects, like, do you want to consume as much as your portfolio as possible before the timeline, or do you want to have some level of savings? So that's like another factor, or like to pass along to someone, or whatever. So
Yeah.
very subject, like different for every person, and it's an important variable for a complicated calculator if you want to eventually.
I do have two kids. So I have a 20-year-old son and a 23-year-old daughter. So of course I would love to leave them as much as I can. You know what I mean? The goal is to leave them money, when I pass away. So I haven't really calculated that yet. You know what I mean? But I own a home as well. So there's equity in our house. We have probably just over $1 million of equity in the home, which I keep telling my wife, let's sell the house and invest the money, but she's not there yet. So, okay, here's a scenario for you, and it's obviously me. Say you were my age, 52. Now I could easily get a full-time job and just keep working until I'm 65. But let's say I don't want to work full-time and I want to use my portfolio to help pay some of my bills. So it's January 1st, and we are in January now, so we're not that far off. It's the beginning of January. I only have a small portfolio. I consider it small portfolio of $400,000. How would I go about figuring out what would be a safe withdrawal rate for myself?
Yeah, I thought I was planning to mentally prepare myself for this question, because I knew you were going to ask.
It's a tough one, eh?
But yeah, it's a really tough one, man. Because okay, like I said, it depends on the expected return and the volatility of the investment that you currently have this 400K with in. So, right, if it was in a 4% GIC or whatever, you could just withdraw 4%.
Yeah,
like we discussed. But if we go with the U.S. market data, it would be like that's the 4% shortcut to, if we think that the future is roughly 10% and has the volatility where there was a lot of volatility in that data set, where there was like the World War II, the Great Depression, and things like that. So I would start there, but I think lots of things affect that, because you can go back to work, like you said, which can increases the, let's say it's part of your total returns, like of the year, that increases that up to a certain percentage, and effectively.
Do you want to give her a chicken foot?
Again, it's complicated, because I don't know if you want to preserve it some amount, or you just want to eventually be able to spend it all at the end. But you said like you want to at least leave a certain amount, right? So it's tough. I mean, I would think of all these variables and eventually get back to you on that with a more nuanced calculator. But it would be at least 4%.
Okay, so you think I could withdraw at least 4%, which, if my math is right, that would be 16,000.
But again, the assumptions are the key, right?
Yeah.
Of the return. Some people have without speaking about your strategy, which can change at any time, like, some people think they have a 20% return with very low volatility, and that person can withdraw way more than 4%. But then it's up to them, how reliable those assumptions are.
Yeah.
And it can be dangerous to have those assumptions if you just started over the last few years, which is why like Levy and I are very cautious about that stuff. And that's why like people use those historical data. It's not that people can't return 20%, but it's like, hey, what's reasonable? What's the average person in aggregate of the market? What are they likely to expect to return? And of course, I'm a Ben Felix nerd. He looked at non-US; those returns were lower, so that's why it's like, okay, maybe your adjustment. That's why he put like he came out with a video with a 2.7% rule, because the 4% was so influenced by the U.S. market, which have been killing it. So, but again, lots of factor for you, which is like if you are able to get back into work, you have some leeway there. Again, the 4% is overly conservative for a reason. So you shouldn't feel bad if you're withdrawing more than that, in my opinion. At least in year one. I mean, you can always adjust, right? Like the market tanks a lot. Then year two, you're like, okay, pump the brakes. I got to get back to work and do all these other things to adjust. So it's not like, unless you go ridiculous, right, and withdraw like 20% of your portfolio, it's not. I don't think you're going to nuke yourself with a bad decision here.
I don't know if you follow them. There's a couple of Americans. One of them has a channel called The Income Architect. I think his first name's Brad.
No, I haven't.
Haven't seen him. And then there's another gentleman who has a channel called The Income Armchair.
Whoa, I have to check those out after.
So both of them are retired. Okay. I think both of them aim to earn about 8 to 12% a year and live off of 8%. Do you think that's something I could do, or do you think that's too aggressive?
I think that's probably too aggressive. I'd have to look at the composition of that strategy, why they believe in that, and a lot of the reasons why. Like, it might make sense in their mind, right? And to me, if their assumption is like these are very stable holdings, then I'm like, okay, I guess I can see where you got to that point. But to me, as long as a portfolio is tied to some form of equity, to stocks, it just can't be that safe, right? There's a reason we're compensated for those extra returns compared to a GIC. It's because they're riskier. And so intuitively, it doesn't make sense to me, right? And it's not, of course, it's not a shot at anyone's assumptions or understanding of their strategy.
Of course. So I know earlier you mentioned the conversation I had with Darren, and I was thinking about this with some of the other young guys on Blossom. Actually, one of them used to be an income investor, which he probably shouldn't at 20 years old. And he decided to go all growth, right? And his goal, I think he said his goal was to have $3 or $4 million, by the time he's in his 50s.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to figure out is if he actually got to say $2 million, and like you were saying before, the 4% rule, 4% of 2 million, I believe, is 80,000. If my math is right.
Yeah.
So if you got to the point where you had a portfolio of $2 million, is that what you would do? Is pull out 80,000, or am I understanding the 4% rule wrong? Because what I'm thinking is, in my mind, by the time he's 50 or 55, which is a long time from now, $80,000 is not going to be a lot of money.
Right. So at least the 4% rule has inflation adjusted as part of its consideration. Okay. So I forget the actual formula they use, but it means that you can bump it up. Well, of course, post-COVID, we saw inflation go crazy, but I think in the paper, they probably assume 2 to 3%. So you're taking out 80, and you're taking out 80 plus 2% of 80, and you keep doing that. So you are actually taking way more in the later years.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. Gar, you are an XEQT investor. So for people on my channel who are, watching me talk about income funds all the time, what is XEQT?
So XEQT is just the quickest way is just global diversification in one ticket and one fund. And we don't look at it as, well, I don't look at it as a growth or dividend thing at all. It's just you're trying to get exposure based on the market cap weights, roughly. It's obviously not perfect, roughly market cap weights of the world. So, and then XEQT, VEQT, and ZEQT have a home bias to appeal to Canadian investors more, so they have more Canadian. But the idea is still the same. Like within that, basically market cap investments, and the only reason it leans more growth is because the world just has more growth companies. So it's like an indirect, like it's incidental that people confuse it with a growth strategy because it's not the intent to be in growth. You're just copying the world, and there's just less dividend companies. But that approach is just, again, to try to have exposure to everything. And it really relies on the idea of, that the market is pretty efficient, meaning like most companies, or if not all, are fairly competitively priced, that it's hard to get an edge. So instead of like selecting anything, hey, just give me the whole basket. So we don't see things as, oh, this is a bad company, right? Which is a common beginner misconception of the XEQT strategy. It's like, it's not that I hold bad companies. It's like, well, people have to price a bad company badly for it to be bad, right? Right now, it's probably priced as a bad company. So there is no obvious upside or downside to holding it, if that makes sense.
Do you have any, I know it has over 8,000 stocks. Do you have any idea how often the stocks change, or the companies that it holds change within XEQT? Or I guess there's really no way to know unless you go through all the holdings.
Right. I'd have to go through all of them. I've seen that number go from 9,000 to high 8,000. So they've definitely adjusted, probably have to turn over some of the really, really small, like less than 1% companies every now and then. But yeah, I don't really keep track. I just assume that for the most part, they know what they're doing, and they're just doing some sort of rules-based approach, and that I don't have to be too, I don't have to like babysit that or check it out.
Yeah. And across those companies, is it even, or you said it's market weighted?
Market weighted.
Like a company like Apple, Microsoft would have a larger percentage?
Correct. So that's obviously one of the more popular topics of conversation, is how big it is in a VFV type of portfolio in S&P 500. But when you own the globe, it becomes a much smaller. So it's less of a concern if you are concerned about that.
Right. But I guess if a company like Tesla or something takes off and goes to the moon, you won't really notice a big increase in XEQT because it's such a small part of it.
Right. Like I'll still get a good boost from it, but it's not like it balloons so much that I have to worry about like it dropping or something.
Yeah, I will say I've been impressed with it because I owned it about a year ago. I decided to sell it just to have more cash to buy income funds, and I think it was about $27 a share. And now what is it, sitting at 41? So I've got two of my sons investing in XEQT now, and actually one of them I put it in his first home savings account. Do you think that's a good place for it, or?
Yeah, especially if it's like if they're only going to get a house somewhere down the line, and because that's what I did.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on the risk tolerance and the when, like the key is when you need to use that money, and if you're willing to adjust that time frame if the market crashes. So like I had an idea that I was going to buy a house soon, but I didn't have like an exact time, though my wife would probably disagree. She would have wanted it when we had it.
Yeah.
But like if you take a riskier approach, you have to be willing to wait out a few years if it crashes, right? Because then you're going to miss out on all those higher expected returns. But definitely starting an FHSA, I would definitely go with 100% XEQT, or have a large portion into that.
Yeah, that's what I did for him. I put it all 100% XEQT for his first home savings account. Now my youngest son, in his portfolio, he has XEQT, but he also has VEQT. It is VEQT, right? The one that's factor. Is it factor based?
No, that's the Vanguard one. FEQT you're thinking about.
FEQT.
The Fidelity Factor one.
Yeah, FEQT. So he has FEQT and XEQT. Do you see any reason not to hold both, or?
No, like the only reason people say that you shouldn't hold multiple, like, and you asked in one of my posts, is just that like you don't want if you want your portfolio to look cleaner on a desktop, like you don't want to have two different holdings. But if like they sort of are going to do about the same, or expect to do them about the same. So, there is no real downside unless like you're OCD and really want just one holding. You can have multiple of them, and also maybe like somewhere down the line, it depends on if you're the type of person who is gonna like get paralyzed by which one to sell out of them versus like me. I just know because it's just only one option.
Yeah.
But outside of that, there's no big downside. Like there's no big downside in holding different S&P 500 ETFs, but that's different. That there's more reason not to do that because they're just holding the same thing.
Right.
Versus FEQT actually has some small differences. So
yeah,
you want a bit of Bitcoin exposure in your overall portfolio, it's fine. You can hold both.
I posted my goals on Blossom for 2026, and one of them is I'm buying $100 worth of XEQT every week. And somebody commented on it saying that XEQT can't even outpace inflation. That I didn't understand because I looked at their returns, and over the last year, that's up, I think, 22%. In the last 4 or 5 years, it's up like 70%. So I didn't understand that comment about not being able to outpace inflation.
You're going to get a lot of that from active investors that think they have a huge edge, or strong Bitcoin people that are very one of the key arguments for Bitcoin is inflation, right? So generally, you're going to get people who say that because they enjoy a far riskier strategy. So they have to make XEQT look bad or slow to justify why they're just, in my opinion, in some cases, YOLOing with their money more, right? So it's like, you can't even beat inflation. So obviously you have to take more risks. But, I don't, and as you've seen with the data, that's just not true. You don't have to. So,
no.
But, go ahead. Put more, like, I don't have a strong opinion on Bitcoin. Just, you can put more if you want, but you're generally going to get a lot of that from people who are worried about inflation.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, Carr, I don't know if I have any other questions for you, but I'm going to obviously keep tracking my withdrawals and see how my portfolio does. And maybe in a few months down the road, we can check back in and see how it's doing.
Yeah, I'm actually, because you inspired me to work on a calculator that tells you how to, but like if you wanted to spend all the way down to zero. So it's like a different approach than the fixed income. And I think I'm probably going to be done with it, and like maybe later today if I have time, or this week. I'm excited to put it out. I did want to reply like to something you guys were discussing in the last episode before we ended this. Is like, yeah, Carr seems like a smart guy. He knows all these things. So why doesn't he? Wouldn't he be one of the better stock pickers if you wanted to do that? And I think for me, I just wanted to quickly explain to you how I see it. It's more like, I think stocks basically you should view as like a complicated board game or whatever. And I'm just someone who knows the rules better than most people, but that doesn't mean I think I have a winning strategy yet, right? So I think that's where I come across as like, I know my stuff. I should probably be, but there's a difference between knowing the rules better than everyone and being able to have a long-term winning strategy. And a lot of my energy is that like the bulk of my money actually has been made through sports betting.
Right. Darren reminded me of that. I forgot.
Right. And so you can see where some of my skills were to modeling sports and stuff like that, like programming different stuff. So that type of stuff, does that convert over to stocks? Probably some of those skills. But I haven't put any thought into that realm yet.
Honestly, it was a compliment from me to you, because I think for a lot of people who are picking stocks, right, probably most of them don't do their due diligence. They don't look at the financial statements. They don't really know what they're picking. Where to me, you come across as the kind of person who would do the actual research needed before you bought a stock, and you probably would pick more winners than losers, and you could probably outperform XEQT. But at the same time, that's a lot of work, right? That's a lot of work. Outside of your job and your family and other commitments, do you really want to sit down and spend 4 or 5 hours a day trying to figure out what the next big stock is. So
But I took it as the utmost compliment.
yeah.
So I really appreciate you guys saying that.
Yeah. So, well, let me know when you figure out. See, the thing is, you said you're going to work on a calculator. People always ask me, how much do you have to reinvest, right? As if I know the magic answer of, you earn so much money in income from covered call ETFs. How much can you safely withdraw, and how much can you, or how much should you have to reinvest? So it's something that I'm trying to figure out as well. And but I'm actually doing it with real money, so
Right,
I have to be
right.
very
And
careful.
the key again, just to repeat it a lot, is like you got to figure out the input to these calculators is the expected total return of your strategy.
Yeah.
And that's why it makes it so hard, because it's hard to really say. You can have a range,
Yeah.
right? But
And I don't know about you, but for me, it's almost hard to predict. Like, for example, to say how much my portfolio is going to make in 2026. Before we jumped on together, I was taking a look at last year. I had a swing from January to April where my portfolio dropped almost $80,000.
right,
Right, but then from that point, it went back up 154,000. You know what I mean? So it's hard to know at any given moment how much it's going to make. It all kind of depends on the markets, and I have a lot of invested in things like not Bitcoin but MSTR through MSTE. So if that rips, you know what I mean. I could make 100% in 2026. If it drops, I could lose 100%. So it's hard for me to predict, but I think if I just go conservative and assume that I'm going to make that 10%, keep it low, and but I'm not going to withdraw 10%. That would be too much. No.
Yeah. So any good calculator, if you ever find one, you let me know.
Yeah.
Any good one should take into account expected return and the volatility of your strategy, because like someone that expects 10% in VFV versus 10% in like an MSTR strategy, it's going to look very different in terms of safe withdrawal.
So my goal, anyways, is to take out 2,000 a month for this year, which would be 24,000. And I think, is that 6%? I think that's 6%.
And you're doing it per month, so it's not like you can adjust if you need to.
That's true. All right, Carr, I'll let you get back to work. It was really a pleasure talking with you.
Had a great time. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.